Lost in the dusty, dog-eared pages of American criminal history. Join us as we relive another gruesome, grisly, gripping tale of murder, mischief, and mayhem. Created and written by Justin Vior. This series is an anthology of turn-of-the-century banner headline cases before the days of high-tech forensic criminology. America's chilling, appalling, yet intriguing heritage of murder. Tonight's case, The Evil of the Age, Episode 2.
There we are, a nice piping spot of tea, as the British say. They conquered the world and built their Victorian empire on the stuff, so there must be something to it. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, back in the tempestuous year 1871, when newspapers decried back-alley abortions as, quote, the evil of the age, unquote. After the good Dr. Jacob Rosenzweig, a New York City medical practitioner, was arrested in a police raid on his facility after a botched procedure left the 19-year-old victim dead, after which he stuffed the poor girl, as yet unnamed, into a steamer trunk and thought to ship her to Chicago. Let's proceed with our story. We take it up in a jail cell in the 20th Police Precinct, where an indignant Inspector Walling, after apprehending the rascal Rosenzweig before he could flee his facility through a third-story window, pays him a visit and brings along a most interesting visitor.
Rouse up, Butcher. Inspector Walling would have a look at you.
Herr Dr. Rosenzweig. Good afternoon. I am Inspector Walling of the local precinct. This is my companion, Mr. James F. Boyle, doing business in our city as an undertaker. Perhaps you both have met prior. Mr. Boyle.
He is the man, Inspector.
Stand in your cell, please, Herr Rosenzweig. Mr. Boyle?
Oh, yes, beyond question. That's the man. Come to my place of business the morning of Saturday last, inquiring on the cost of bearing a servant girl he said perished while in his employ. Cared nothing for the particulars, just that it be done cheaply. I related to him that a burial permit must be obtained from the health board, requiring certification from the girl's physician of care. Then he left and failed to darken my doorway thereafter.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Good day, Herr Doctor. We'll leave you now to your reveries.
Reveries indeed. Rosenzweig may not have had much of a conscience, but he was indeed capable of reveries. One's recalling a morning 10 days ago when one of the nurses at his facility on Amity Place here in the city showed a handsome young couple into his consultation room.
Sir, miss, the doctor will be with you directly. No cause for fear.
Good morning. I am Dr. Rosenzweig. I suppose you two called for medical services.
The girl was Alice Bowlesby, age 19, beautiful, 5'5", golden blonde tresses, a straw hat trimmed with ribbons and flowers, donning a light shawl and carrying a parasol and small leather satchel. The man, 27, tall, handsome, and wearing a dark suit, was Walter Conklin.
Medical services, yes. Alice came upon your advertisement in the Morning Herald?
Exactly. We understand each other. You wish to release the young lady from the burden of her difficulty.
What is your fee for rendering such services?
This be the young lady, I assume? What are your symptoms, miss?
Sir, it has persisted for nearly 3 months. My size is beginning to grow. I can no longer hide.
Understood. You wish to save the young lady and her family from embarrassment, sir. I can do this without danger. I will not fool you. You know the risks there is in such business. $200. If there are no troubles, I will see the lady safely through the matter for that sum.
But the result, sir, what's to be done with the result?
No, sir. I will dispose of the result. You need not be troubled with that.
What can be done to save our reputations?
Dear miss, I will give you marriage or burial certificates. I have quiet means for both.
But if it is discovered in the eyes of the law, who...
Do not be troubled on that account, sir. I will see to that. A basket sunk in the river, A newspaper bundle dropped in the sewer by cover of night. Easy as drinking chicken soup. No one will be the wiser.
Oh, dear.
Oh dear, indeed. The result, as they called it. Such were the reveries of Herr Dr. Rosenzweig on his first meeting with the young couple who had come to him 10 days earlier for assistance and relief. Now, as Rosenzweig sat in a stark jail cell, 2 other doctors, actually one a dentist, were presenting themselves at the Paterson, New Jersey home of Alice Bowlesby's mother, who, having been apprised vaguely of the situation prior by authorities and was awaiting further word, sat in the parlor with her 2 daughters, Alice's younger sisters, to receive the visitors and their grim news.
Please, have a seat, gentlemen. Some hospitality?
No, nothing. Thank you, madam. Ladies, I am Dr. Kinney, a physician with practice in New York. This is Dr. Parker, who practices dentistry in your locale in Paterson. We've come to... Please steady yourself, ladies.
Oh, dear.
We've returned from the most grim errand which took us to the morgue of the Bellevue Hospital in New York. Madam, Dr. Parker and myself have indeed identified the unfortunate victim in the affair as your lovely daughter, Alice. Our comforts to you, madam. Your Alice was ever known to be a high-minded girl and never the object of suspicion or blame in these circumstances. Yet I must broach a further inquiry delicately. Authorities will pursue the matter with you. Regarding the tempter of her virtue, have you a notion as to the identity of this seducer?
Such frail ladies, such a ghastly intelligence to receive. Jacob Rosenzweig wasn't the only person with reveries and a test of conscience over the fate of poor Alice Bowlesby of Paterson, New Jersey. So did her clandestine boyfriend, whom we met a moment ago in the doctor's consultation room, 27-year-old tempter of virtue, Mr. Walter Conklin. His careworn mind could not help but dwell upon the last time he saw Alice in the quietude of the care room of Rosenzweig's medical facility.
I'm here, Alice.
Just as you promised. Thank you, darling. Promise me, you'll be here when I awaken?
Surely, I promise, directly by your side, love. But now, I must go. This is all hard for me to bear.
Someday, Walter, when we can be properly wed, this all will be a distant memory. Hardly real at all.
Someday.
Then we shall be together, Walter. Yes?
Of course, dear. Someday. Hush now. Rest.
Walter Conklin tried to sound convincing. Perhaps Alice was convinced. I hope so. Those were the last words she was ever to hear from the man whom she so tragically gave her virtue for love. Conklin left her in the care room and stepped out onto the front stoop to take the air. Someone was there waiting for him. That 100-year-old dame from the Hudson River train depot.
Finally. What took so long? Is it arranged?
Yes, within the hour.
Good. All the better when this is behind you.
It would have been my child.
A piece of advice for you, Master Conklin. Heed to your station in life. She is of lower birth. Your father is a high alderman. You cannot disgrace his name with such a dalliance. Consider the money well spent. Come.
I told her I'd be there when she wakes.
All the better when this is behind you, sir. Come.
She seemed like such a nice old thing at the train station, didn't she? Turns out the bird's really a bit, well, we know, of course, how Dr. Rosenzweig's relief services turned out for poor Alice Bowlesby, and the indignity of her fate folded into the steamer trunk. As for the doctor, time passed as he sat idling in the Tombs jail. His matter finally made it to arraignment on the New York City criminal court docket. He was represented before Judge Bedford by Counselor Howell.
Your Honor, This good doctor, of a respected medical background, has been confined and restrained of his liberties, detained on the pretense of a charge wholly unfounded, a supposed murder regarding of which there has been no official inquiry, and of which notwithstanding he is wholly innocent. Nor for these days of confinement has this man been granted opportunity to confront his accusers. On this ground, as statute provides, we hereby petition Your Honor for a writ of habeas corpus and my client's immediate release and return to the community.
Denied. Return him to his jail cell. Next case.
Judge Bedford wasn't having it. Unpersuaded by the doctor's respected medical background touted by the defense counsel, a background applied in a legally and socially disreputable manner. So back to the tombs he went to languish, perhaps to continue reveries about that fateful morning when a nurse brought 19-year-old Alice Bowlesby into the surgery room of alias Dr. Asher's abortion facility and prepped her to die.
Lie down, miss. Here, let me help you. Try not to fear.
Thank you. Nurse, will it hurt?
You won't feel a thing. A dab of ether over the mouth to make you sleep. Here it comes. Just the same. There. You'll be asleep and dreaming in a moment.
Yes. Tell Walter I love.
To be a good Christian girl in America of the late 1800s, in love yet unmarried, and with the normal desires of the flesh, which the pervasive Victorian-era suppression could not douse, coupled with the threat of stigma should that good Christian girl act on those desires, was tantamount to taking your life into your hands. Two nurses laid out the crude instrumentation to facilitate the procedure. No surgical masks were used in the day. Sterile was a lax concept.
Are we ready? Okay. Lift the nightgown above the area. Each of you, take a leg and spread. Wider, please.
I think we can leave it there. Within an hour or two, Alice Bowlesby would be gone. And 2 weeks thereafter, Inspector Walling and officials of the Manhattan Police Department would stand in that same dark, airless, and oppressive room, examining the very surgical instruments employed in the murder.
Rouse up, Butcher. You have a visitor.
Jakob?
It's your wife. You have 15 minutes.
Oh, what are you doing here, Waltrud?
You think I not come visit you? I was at the court. I see what happened.
Waltrud, I fear there's little hope.
Nein, do not say that. There is hope. You did nothing wrong.
Except stuff a dead girl in a trunk and try to ship her to Chicago.
You did not mean for to happen what happened. You try to help these ladies. They need help. But all must be done in secret because of the law. That is what is to blame. Forcing the ladies who want no child to have their child. It is wrong.
I told them this, Waltrud. The unmarried ladies do not want the babies. If I do not help them, they do it themselves. Many would die.
I know, Jakob, I know. You have good heart. You try to help.
And you make good money. $200 a pop.
What does the lawyer say?
Chances are not good. Not good. I didn't mean for this to happen to the Fräulein, the girl. For her to die. Terrible, terrible. I tried to save her.
I know, Jakob. It is their secrecy. The hospitals will not help the girls and will not let you help. You had to try to hide her. You had no choice.
Choice? I should have chosen to obey the law. Leave the ladies to cope alone, or find someone else to do it. I don't want to go to prison, Waltrud.
You won't, my dear. You won't. The judge will see. This was not your fault, Jakob. Not your fault.
Time's up, Butcher. Madam, time to go.
Goodbye, Jakob. Look for me in the court. I will be there.
Gentlemen, confiscate and preserve all equipment, clothing, papers, receipts for services rendered, anything of evidentiary value.
Inspector Walling, Captain Caffrey found ledgers in the upstairs office. He's bringing them down to you.
Very good.
Inspector?
Caffrey, What did you find?
Inspector, it appears to be a journal of the patients the doctor attended. Miss Joanna Picco, number 15 Baynard Street. Miss Bernston of Poughkeepsie. Miss Daymont, number 144 7th Avenue. And this seems a list of receipts collected from the gentleman. Mr. Peck of number 25 Hester Street, $50. Mr. Fisher, number 41 Walker Street, $200. Mr.
Retain it for evidence, Caffrey. Good work. Has the fella in question, the girl's seducer, been identified?
Presently, sir. His discovery is imminent.
They were on Walter Conklin's trail. 2 weeks earlier, he was right there at Rosenzweig's facility, dashing out the front door in horror and stumbling down the front stoop to where the old woman, perhaps a close associate of the family, was awaiting word of the money well spent by Walter's father, High Alderman Conklin.
She's dead. She's dead. The nurse told me she died during the... They've killed her.
My lord. Good heavens. Compose yourself, sir. Take hold of yourself. What would your father say?
This sickens me. What have I done?
What of the girl?
Aren't you listening? Dead, I told you.
The body, Master Conklin. The body. Another pretty sight. Sir, take hold of yourself. You have responsibilities. Listen to me. Go now carefully to the rail yard, board the train back to Patterson Station, and proceed directly home. I will conclude matters here with the physician.
Madam, how can you be so unfeeling, so...
Walter Conklin clearly had no stomach for such nasty business. But she's ice, that one. No romance in her soul, and not much of a soul. At least her young charge, Master Conklin, the alderman's son, felt remorse and regret. And to his credit, perhaps, the feelings were too much for him. Afterward, he cried real tears over the fate of Alice Bowlesby.
Alice, I did this to you. I'm sorry. Alice.
And he proved his remorse several days later with a revolver, a shot point blank to his head. Tragic young lovers under the weight of stern social stigma. That was the temper of the times in Victorian late 19th century America. Now, you'll recall the mention of the ledger Rosenzweig kept of the names of young lady clients and male benefactors. Interestingly, police gave the names it contained to the press, which dutifully printed them in the papers of record as a matter of morality and public service, the journalistic practice of the day. I wonder if, given such opportunity today, in the absence of laws forbidding it, our moralizing modern media would stoop to act the same. But let's move this sad affair along now. Several months or so into a crowded courtroom at the Court of General Sessions in Manhattan, packed with press and curiosity seekers in the days before 24-hour cable news. The Rosenzweig trial and the case of the girl in the steamer trunk were among the notable forerunners of that phenomenon. Rosenzweig sat stiffly in the dock at the bar in front of the courtroom, small pen for displaying the accused to a scornful public. His attorney, Counselor Howe, sat nearby. Manhattan District Attorney Garvin was on the other side, and behind him an eager Inspector Walling. A nervous Frau Rosenzweig sat in the gallery, trading helpless glances with her defendant husband. But what caught the breath of the gallery was the entrance of three women donning black widow's weeds, the garb of death and mourning. They were Alice Bowlesby's mother and two sisters, proceeding gingerly down the courtroom's center aisle.
All rise. Proceedings in this Court of General Sessions, City and State of New York do hereby commence. Presiding in session, Recorder Julius V. Hackett and His Honor, Judge John Bedford.
The courtroom may be seated.
The charge against Dr. Rosenzweig was manslaughter.
Prosecution may commence. Mr. Garvin, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Good gentlemen of the jury, it becomes my duty to direct a careful investigation by you of a crime so revolting and depraved, so contrary to the community morality, that it cries aloud for the heaviest punishment the law will permit. Need I say, gentlemen, I allude to the unnatural and horrific crime of fetal abortion, a crime so common in the larger metropolitan cities of our nation that it has assumed the horrid shape of a veritable business enterprise, trafficking in the blood of the living as well as the unborn.
Garvin was a veritable William Jennings Bryan, a far better-known legal mind who, 50 years later, would do a prosecutorial turn in the famous Scopes monkey trial. Counselor Howe, representing the defendant, was no legal slouch, but certainly no Clarence Darrow. Evolution and abortion, two controversial social issues of their days. Now it was Howe's turn to preface the defense's case.
I direct my words not to the 12 gentlemen of the jury alone, but to good Christian persons everywhere. For in this modern age, there arise considerations of fundamental character which ought to come home with directness and force to a great commercial city such as ours. Among these is good faith and liberal understanding between fellow men.
I'm not quite sure what the counselor was driving at here. Maybe he felt his client's case was on such shaky ground. He was just muddying the waters to confuse the jury. Be that as it may, let's get back to Prosecutor Garvin.
Pity the plight of a young girl, ruined and betrayed. One Alice Bowlesby, a child of misfortune, stricken with the fear that each day brings her nearer to disgrace. Born into poverty, yet with natural beauty, a gift sometimes most ruinous of all blessings bestowed from above. Daily, she is tempted by a caste of rascals who stalk and surround her. And under this terrible temptation, lured by the suggestion of love by the man in question, the virtuous young lady falls, her virtue tarnished and permanently stained.
Have mercy! I sobbed for a daughter, now lost.
Counselor Howe, if you please.
As Jefferson put it, the right to life, to liberty, to the pursuit of one's own happiness, founded in the penultimate right and value, that called freedom.
I'm still not quite getting where the counselor is going. Neither was the jury. But perhaps that last word he used, freedom, may give a hint. So, what say, Mr. Garvin?
Sympathize with the poor girl's distress as her callous betrayer tells the beauty they cannot be wed. A situation from which her desperate resort is to seek the aid of unprincipled scoundrels who, without pretense or shame, peddle coded advertisements of their murderous trade openly in the public press.
The legal opponents went back and forth, making their cases serve and volley.
When society itself exacts the terrible price of ostracism from unfortunates who cannot bear the standard of conformity to the at-large notion of propriety, who then is truly at fault? Who truly merits blame?
Her youthful body, once flush with the glow of life. Life not only of motherhood, but of the newborn, discovered in a nude state, stuffed into a steamer trunk, the girl's stifling, unconsecrated coffin.
Does the weight of judgment rest upon one man alone, or rather upon society? To wit, on us all.
When your client's guilty of sin, I suppose you blame everyone in sight. Interesting defense.
Under the facts as established, the law might presume malice in this instance, and the charge be upgraded to premeditated murder. Alas, gentlemen, such is not our lot. For the state, in its questionable wisdom, and under constraint of an unduly merciful legislature, seeks conviction on the mere wrist-slap charge of manslaughter. Hardly a punishment befitting the crime committed by the wretch who stands before you. Death through medical malpractice.
Wretch, the prosecutor calls him. Yet I ask you, consider the man outside the glare of modern sensationalism. Is it a malicious motive that offers a shoulder of solace to a vulnerable outcast? Is it but pernicious opportunism, which stands alone against the tide of moral sanctimony at large? Against the spirit that proffers sympathy to innocence lost to death, yet breathed whispers of aspersion had this innocence lived? There is the dry rot undermining the social fiber, dear people. The dry rot hypocrisy.
A flair for words, that Counselor Howell. Lavish, flowery language. I believe we understand his point. Prosecutor Garvin's point was quite different.
For gain of personal pecuniary compensation, this miscreant, this malpractitioner, preys upon the misfortune of the weaker sex, peddling fetal abortion, immorality, and dare I say it, I do dare say it, murder. And in the matter before this court, gentlemen, this fiend bears responsibility for the murder not merely of one life, but of three, of maiden, of child, and of the young gentleman who, harried by circumstance, takes his own worthless life.
I say no to this argument. If the question be one of culpability, then on whose shoulders and conscience, to whose account is the debt to be laid? The fallen maiden? Her tempter? A physician who is not God, but merely human? On the spirit of the age, which inspires such tragic consequences. I thank you, gentlemen of the jury. If it please the court, counsel for the defense now rests.
Prosecutor Garvin, the state's summation?
That such malefactors are permitted to ply their murderous trades amounts to public injury, a national disgrace. So great is the evil thus occasioned, and yet absent is the stringency of law, the foundation of our great democracy. Gentlemen jurors, that you may fully understand the import of your duty, it is with all earnestness that we, the people of the great state of New York, ask your assent in the denunciation and suppression of vice, to punish with just severity this wretched man and his entire misbegotten ilk, the medical abortionist, worst enemy of the human race. The prosecution rests.
Stirring summations, commendable performances, but only one view, one morality could prevail. I wonder what Dr. Jacob Rosenzweig's reveries were as he listened as both his legal defender and detractor dueled and debated in point and verbal counterpoint on his culpability in this sad business. The day, the moment young Alice Bowlesby succumbed on his illegal operating table.
No! There's too much blood!
She's waking, Doctor. She's moving.
More ether! Keep her down!
I can't hold her leg up and apply the ether at the same time.
I'll hold the leg.
You can't operate with one hand.
I'll hook up her leg, nurse. Put her out.
There's too much blood. Too much blood.
Oh, the lining is torn. I can't stop it. Nurse, assist me. God damn the heavens!
Oh, Jesus, Mary, Holy St. Joseph, help her!
It wasn't long. When it was over and the room quiet, Rosenzweig left the surgery chamber and repaired to his third-floor office for a stiff belt. Something stronger than tea, to be sure. The two nurses left the room, steadying themselves. Alice was left alone on the operating table, a blood-soaked sheet covering her lifeless 19-year-old form. Later, a nurse gathered the girl's clothing from where it hung neatly in an outer chamber. Her purse, other personal effects, shoved into a gunny sack, later tossed from a dock into the Hudson River. Her employer told them to clean the room, make sure nothing of an identifying nature remained behind. Rosenzweig himself carried Alice's body, wrapped in a linen sheet, outside to a horse-drawn carriage, waiting there under cover of night, and took Alice to the only place he could think of.
Why have you brought here? To our home?
There is no place else. Stand aside. She's heavy. Lights the lamp. Opens the basement door.
No, Jakob. My God. Nein.
Where's the steamer trunk? Quiet, woman. There's nothing else to be done.
Nothing else to be done. Gives you the shivers. Rosenzweig's goose might really have been cooked with the jury if they'd been privy to that callous, defeatist pronouncement. Still, the verdict was rendered.
Quiet in the courtroom. The defendant, Jacob Rosenzweig, will rise to the judgment of this court.
In the foregoing matter as pertains to the death and demise of Alice Augusta Bowlesby, a jury of the defendant's peers does find and pronounce Jacob Rosenzweig guilty on the charge of manslaughter in the first degree. Accompanying the verdict is a recommendation, may it please the court, by the jury to show the defendant mercy. Ordinarily, I might heed such a recommendation, but in the present case, as presiding judge, I must disavow. For you, sir, deserve no mercy. On the evidence presented, you stand before this court today in the aspect and attitude of a murderer, one who sent two human beings to their final account before God, willfully, deliberately, murderously, for pecuniary profit. Were it in my power, the sentence I should pronounce against such a one is death. I concur with this court and its verdict, and unite with it in recommendation to the legislature that this felonious and barbarous practice be ended. You are a man of uncommon nerve, Mr. Rosenzweig, as has been exhibited in the course of these proceedings. Never have I witnessed a man who withstood the remarks and accusations of the prosecution so utterly and unfeelingly unmoved. You are an educated man, sir, but you are a dangerous one. I sentence you to the fullest reach of the law. 7 years in New York State prison at hard labor. Remove the prisoner. Court session is adjourned.
A stern dressing down from Judge Bedford, naming Rosenzweig publicly as an irredeemable monster. There was talk, however, do you remember a Mr. Pickett who drove the horse cart to the train depot? There was talk that as he unwittingly loaded the steamer trunk aboard his cart in front of the Rosenzweig home, the doctor himself watched through a window pane, tears of remorse streaming down his cheeks. I hope so. Responding to the public outcry over the evil of the age, the New York State Legislature a year later upgraded the offense of death through abortion to the equivalent of murder punishable by 20 years. Inadvertently, however, the change in law worked in Jacob Rosenzweig's favor. He was granted a new trial in which it was ruled that his case could not be tried under the new law. In February 1873, after serving 2 years in prison for the death of Alice Bowlesby of Paterson, New Jersey, Dr. Rosenzweig was released, his medical license revoked, but a free man. And there it is. Tragic little tale, but I hope you enjoyed it. And now I could do with another cup of tea. Until next time, in another tale of murder, mischief, and mayhem, I'm G.W. Bailey. Good night.
Murder, Mischief, and Mayhem is an anthology of our rich American heritage of scandal, mystery, and murder, revived from the faded pages of history. You can find Murder, Mischief, and Mayhem wherever you listen to your podcasts. Created and written by Justin Vior. Directed by Ken Yaz. Narrated by G.W. Bailey. Produced by Ed Adler and Ken Yaz. Sound design and music score by Ray Soldick. Casting by The Voice Caster. Script supervision by Stephen Glennon and Maria Norris. This podcast is dedicated to the memory and inspiration of Dr. W. Keith Krause. Murder, Mischief, and Mayhem is the property and production of Ed and Ken's Excellent Adventure, LLC. All rights reserved.